Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Geopolitics, and today is September the 11th. This is a quick video to tell you what is going on in Ukraine. In the last 3 days, the Ukrainians have taken almost I believe it's 6,000 square kilometers of territory, if we measure it out. Yeah, it's about 6,000 square kilometers of territory which they've taken. The latest territory they've taken is in the north right here. The troops have headed north. And what everyone is wondering now, though, I'll show you another map. This is from Rybar. It shows basically how the Ukrainians went in, took Balaklia, then went north, took Shevchenkov, went towards Kupiansk, took Senkove, and then took Kupiansk, and then basically they cut off the Russians, the northern group from the southern group. The southern garrison in Izium was at risk of encirclement because there was a risk that the Ukrainians were going to also launch an offensive on Liman. And then in that case, the Russian troops at Izium would be completely blocked off and they would be encircled. So the Russians avoided being encircled. That's the only positive out of this thing. They lost a lot of territory, but they didn't lose their troops. Now the only question is, because now the Russians are across the Oskil River here, right? And there's a couple bridges. There's one at Kupiansk and another one at Senkove right here. But the thing is, river crossings are very risky because it doesn't matter how many troops the Ukrainians have and how many the Russians have. The Russians have the capability to destroy these bridges. And, if they can't, whatever number the Russians think they can handle, whatever number they think they can surround and destroy, they might allow that number to cross, and then they'll destroy the bridge or the bridges. And then what happens next? The Ukrainians on the east side of the river will be stranded and surrounded by Russian troops and most likely destroyed, unless they're really good swimmers. But usually with when you have ammo on you and you have a Kevlar vest, I mean you're dead meat. You're gonna sink probably, right? In any case, this is the Oskil River, and the Oskil River, it extends downwards. It goes south, and then it turns into the Seversky Donets River. And the thing is, the Ukrainians have they've established something of a little bridgehead across the Seversky Donets, right? They've basically taken Ozern and Stary Caravan, which I'll show you in a second. Right here, Stary Caravan. But the issue is there's this area is full of forests. They're surrounded by forests, and forests are excellent for defenders to hide in, snipers, ATGM teams, you name it. And they're dealing with the same situation here because from what I hear, the Ukrainians have something like we're not sure, we're not 100% certain, but they have something like 5,000 troops on the other side of the river. So I mean, if let's say 2,000 of them cross, and then imagine the Russians destroy all the bridges or pontoon bridges, whatever it may be. Then they can surround those units and destroy them. Not only that, but again, going through forests is not easy, right? It's not an easy task, especially when the enemy is determined and they're hiding in the forests. Then there are some people that think that the Ukrainians are using this as a diversion, and that really they're going to send the 5,000 towards Seversk and then go for Lysychansk. The issue is that Lysychansk is actually Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. If you remember, the Russians took it, and it took the Russians a month of fighting to take Severodonetsk, and then Lysychansk fell quickly in a week. But essentially, it all depends on the Russians, because so far, I mean, the last 3 days they didn't really put up a fight. They didn't really put their foot down, or draw a line in the sand and decide that they were going to fight. We didn't see any major clashes west of the Oskil River in the Kharkiv Izium sector region. We didn't see that. But because the Russians thought they were outnumbered, and the Ukrainians not only outnumbered them, they outmaneuvered them. The Ukrainians had something like 15 to 25,000 troops, much more than the Russians expected. And the Ukrainians moved really quickly. They went from Andriivka to Balaklia, and then the Russians thought they were going to fight for Balaklia. But then all of a sudden, more Ukrainian units came from behind and turned north, right? While one group was fighting for Balaklia, they took Verbivka, and then while one group was fighting for Balaklia, then another group came and quickly went north. And they didn't take the main highway or anything. They took smaller roads, and I believe at one point they went off-road, but they took Volokiv Yar. Then they went for Shevchenkov, and then the Russians thought, okay, well, they're going to fight for Shevchenkov. Then they turned east, and they quickly went towards the Oskil River. They went towards Kupiansk. And then the Russians thought, okay, they're going to fight for Kupiansk. And then all of a sudden, they turned south, and then they took Senkove, right? So basically, the Ukrainians outmaneuvered them, they outsmarted them, and they caught them off guard. The Russians didn't have enough troops to defend this region, and they couldn't use the Air Force effectively because, well, that's the story of this war. The Russians haven't been able to use the Air Force effectively, mainly because the Ukrainians have a lot of Soviet-era air defense systems, and the Russians are having a hard time tracking those air defense systems down and destroying them, because the Ukrainians don't have their radar turned on, and they don't have those air defense systems turned on all the time. So then you might ask, well, then how are they shooting down Russian planes, and how are they able to present a threat? Well, because that's when NATO comes in. NATO is using AWACS planes and their satellite intelligence to basically figure out where and when the Russians are flying their jets, and they feed this intelligence to the Ukrainians, and using this intelligence, the Ukrainians they basically direct their air defenses based on that intelligence. So in that way, the Ukrainian air defenses are, in a sense, even more dangerous. Actually, they are more dangerous than if they were turned on all the time, because they can just pop out of nowhere. They could be hiding in a barn, in a garage. Suddenly, they get the info. Oh yeah, and another thing, the Ukrainians have a network of spotters on the ground. These spotters also feed them information, but they also have man pads. So if the Russian jets try to fly low to avoid the radar, then the man pads will shoot them down, because man pads can't shoot down anything in a high altitude, but in a low altitude they can. So basically, with the NATO intelligence and with their spotters on the ground, they've basically blunted the power of the Russian Air Force. So the Russians are there's a stalemate in the air basically, and the Russians have destroyed a lot of Ukraine's air defense systems, but the Ukrainians have a lot of Soviet era air defense batteries. So anyways, as long as NATO keeps feeding them intelligence, they're going to keep presenting a threat to the Russian Air Force. So in that case, the Russians would really benefit from having drones, because there's a big difference between you losing a $50,000 fighter jet and the pilot that took years to train, and losing, a $2 million drone, right? Ideally, what the Russians should do is use, if they had a fleet of hundreds of drones, they could saturate the airspace and basically overwhelm the Ukrainians that way. But it's been a month since the Americans have said, and the Americans have doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on, they're saying basically the Iran has sold the Russians hundreds of drones, UAVs. But it's been a month since the Americans, the Pentagon said that the first shipment arrived in Russia. So where are they? Personally, I'm not going to buy it until I'll believe it when I see it. But in any case, that's the story of this war. The Russians, what everyone's wondering is when and where they're going to draw the line and fight and actually engage the Ukrainians. And the issue for the Russians is that they have a severe manpower shortage. Right, they have 170,000 troops covering something like 9,000 kilometers. I mean, we can measure it out, right? Okay, it's going to be very rough and approximate, but I've done it before. I know it's 800, 900 kilometers. Okay, that's good. So yeah, that's 913 kilometers. Okay. Yeah, so 900 kilometers, right? And that's 170,000 troops, which is not nearly enough. Why is it not nearly enough? Well, let's look at Iraq. The Americans, when they went into Iraq, they came from the south, right? So let's measure it out. How long was that front? About 350, 360 kilometers, 220 miles, 226 miles. So I mean, that's basically three times as extensive. The front the Russians are fighting on is 3 times as extensive. Not only that, but the Russians, they're not just heading in one direction. They're not just heading north like the Americans did, right? They're heading from north to south, from east to west, from south to north, right? So, and not only that, but guess what? Most of Iraq is desert, so this front really, it wasn't as wide as it looks. It was something more like I think this would be more fair. So really more than 4 times the length, the front the Russians are fighting on is 4 times the length. Is 4 times wider than the front the Americans had in Iraq. The Americans were fighting on in Iraq. And the issue is, the thing is, the Americans had 370,000 troops and complete air superiority, right? The Iraqis were weak and depleted. The U.S. had been bombing them for 12 years before that. There was the shock and awe campaign, and then NATO or nobody was helping the Iraqis, right? Whereas NATO, the most powerful military institution in the world, is helping the Ukrainians. So it's a completely different ballgame. Anyways, in the rest of Ukraine, the situation is more or less stable. In the Kherson offensive, the Ukrainians have taken the village of Vysokopilia. Right. So they've taken this village, this town, this village / town. If this ever loads. Man, do you have any idea how much I pay for my internet? I am pissed. You freaking fruit, man. Anyways, trust me, it's a village. And aside from that, they have a situation where over here the Ukrainians have created a little bulge southwards, centered around Suki Stavok, but basically the Ukrainians keep setting up pontoon bridges here. The Russians keep, after the Ukrainians set up pontoon bridges, send large amounts of reinforcements. The Russians destroy those pontoon bridges. The Ukrainians are now stranded, and then the Russians pound the Ukrainian positions with artillery and with air support relentlessly. So someone here knows what they're doing. For 2 weeks it's been like this, and the Ukrainians keep sending reinforcements. And so it's like a little mini cauldron. And then over here, after 2 weeks, the Ukrainians have taken... they took Ternovi Podi after some back and forth, and they've taken these two hamlets. Why do I call them hamlets? Because a hamlet is basically smaller than a village, and that's what we have here. We have this little area here. Barvinok, and it's 2 streets, maybe a few dozen houses. So that's what we're dealing with in this region. And of course, the Kharkiv region, the Ukraine. I mean, you can't even compare the level of success the Ukrainians had in Kharkiv to this sector, this region. And aside from that, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been shut down for good. The Ukrainians keep bombing it, and some Russian pundits are wondering why the Russians are not retaliating by bombing Ukrainian nuclear power plants, or why they're not retaliating by bombing the power stations in Zaporizhia or whatever city it may be to shut down the power. I mean, the Russians could easily bomb Kiev and shut off all of the electricity, but they're not. And some pundits are saying, hey, let's take off the kids' gloves, right? In Zaporizhia, this area you see in blue, the Russians have taken. But this little village here, this little village town here, Velika Novosilka, it's surrounded by rivers. So the Russians would have to essentially they would have to get to it, they would have to go over multiple rivers from both sides. I mean, encircling it doesn't seem like it would be that hard, right? It's only it would only be a few kilometers, a few miles, like less than 5. But then there's the rivers, and again, the Russians have they're suffering from a manpower deficiency problem. The goal here is to basically get to this highway right here, the H15, and to cut off the H15. And by doing that, they would cut off all these Ukrainian villages and towns. which the Ukrainians are using as bases to bomb Donetsk city. And they've been doing this since the start of the war. The lines here haven't really shifted much since the start of the war. You have this dark red line represents what the Russians controlled before the start of the war. So I mean, you can see this area is heavily entrenched. So the Ukrainians are heavily entrenched here with. So that's basically why. In Soledar and Bakhmut, the Russians are actually they've sent reinforcements and are going on the offensive of all things. But yeah, I mean, they're not really. I mean, the Russians are gaining ground and territory very slowly. They're suffering from a manpower deficiency problem. So the Russians are going to have to do something. They're either going to have to, like Putin is either going to have to declare war and mobilize at least 500,000 troops. And also those Iranian drones that that the CIA, the Pentagon said, and the White House said Iran had sold to Russia, hundreds of drones. Where are they? I mean, the Russians could sure use them now. I mean, they could use them to saturate the airspace, right? But anyways, those drones, we haven't seen anything. So now they're saying that Russia bought artillery shells and rockets from North Korea. But again, I'll believe it when I see it. Anyways, thank you for listening, guys. That's it for today. And please like and subscribe, share and comment. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.